We're down to the last 2 blocks for our Misty Morning Summer Sew-Along. This week we're going to be making block 11 and 12. Block 11, you'll be making 4 of them. And from fabric C, you'll need to cut 8 squares, 2.5 inches. Make sure that you refer back to your original chart so that you know that you're using the right fabric for these squares. You'll cut 8 squares, 2.5 inches. You might have a strip left over you can cut these from because this is not the first time we've used this fabric, but if not, go ahead and cut one more strip, 2.5 inches, so that you can cut the 8 squares that you'll need of fabric C. You're also going to need 4 squares of your background fabric that are cut 2.5 inches. And you'll also need to cut 4 rectangles that are 4.5 by 6.5 to make this 6-inch finished size block. You'll sew the 2 squares of fabric C on either side of your background. Press the seams in towards the background fabric as indicated by the red arrows. Then sew that strip next to your rectangle to complete your block, and that seam gets pressed towards the background fabric, the larger rectangle, as indicated by the red arrow. You'll make 4 of these, and this is the large area of background fabric that creates this space in the center of our quilt. You make 4 of them so that they are the top, the bottom, the left, and the right sides. So these are really the joining blocks for our quilt. Once you have these completed, and there are 4 of those, then you're going to be making block 12. Now block 12 has 2 different looks to it. You need to make 4 of each one. So you're going to need 8 squares, 2.5 inches of fabric C, and then you're also going to need 8 squares, 2.5 inches of fabric A. Now in the case of fabric A, you may have directional fabric. If you have directional fabric in your A, when you put your blocks together, you're going to want to make sure that you make 2 for each side of your quilt, turning the squares so that they face the correct direction. You're actually making mirror image blocks. Your squares of fabric A and fabric C will get sewn on either end of the rectangles that are cut 2.5 by 4.5. You'll need 16 of those. Now if you remember, we can cut 16 2.5-inch segments from a 40-inch wide strip. So if you cut a strip 4.5 inches wide, you'll be able to cut all 16 rectangles from that one strip. You're also going to need 8 rectangles that are 2.5 by 6.5. I cut those from a 2.5-inch strip. So when you're assembling your blocks, make 4 that look like this and 4 that look like this. So they face opposite directions. They'll be mirror image blocks, and those are going to go in between on each side. So once you have those assembled, then next week we'll give you the layout diagram. We'll talk about sewing your pieces together and adding borders. And then your summer sew-along will be complete.